We are live. Great. Great to have you, Els, today for this interview where we will talk about echo chambers in the context of product management.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So about that and about choosing, because this is really when we talk about startups and early stage, this problem I think is common to 99% of the startup, not wanting to niche down, not wanting to choose, because I think that's where it fails somehow. Does that mean that you don't want and you won't serve those customers that are not in your ICP anymore, or that means that you're actually building the product and making effort for your ICP, but you're okay to serve those other guys? You don't. Do you need to choose that?
You might need to say no, right? Because that makes it a lot easier to take, and you may not, but you may have to.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the thing. The whole point of selecting a target audience is focus. This is what we're all lacking, right? We need focus.
Absolutely.
Focus on what is important and focus in our marketing messaging. Who are we talking to and what resonates with them, instead of this very fluffy message that tries to straddle everything. And also focus in our product development. What are we building? What is important? Which outcomes are we driving? For whom? Right? So then if somebody comes in from outside of our ICP and they have a completely different goal to achieve, or there's like a bunch of customizations that would need to happen to make that work, right? Like you decided to focus on small mid-markets, and now an amazing, awesome enterprise customer is coming in, and he's saying, I will give you a 15 million deal if you just kind of rebuild your entire software for me. Then you have to make a choice. Right?
You can build a new company for that.
You have limited focus. You have limited resources. You can't.
Yeah, so much more efficiency to be able to choose and select early. Where you will put your effort, your marketing effort, your sales effort, your product effort. But you might have to decide.
It's also good sometimes to say, look, we're not ready now, right? Because sometimes if you just say yes because it's so exciting and you're too early, you can burn it as well. And I've also seen stories of startups saying, we wish to have you as a client, amazing, but we really can't make that promise right now. Really honest and transparent. Let's talk again in 9 months. And then in 9 months, in an actual concrete story, this happened. The enterprise client did come back, and the deal did go through, and they could deliver on their promise, right? And I think this is better than saying yes too early and burning it. You have to be able to deliver on the promises that you make.
Yeah, absolutely, and set the right expectation, and that's the ground for good relationship and for healthy relationship, business one as well as personal one, I guess. So set the right expectations, and you will be rewarded for that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about metrics. In the context of PLG, echo chamber, and product management. What would you say, any view, any look on a metric that you believe, or metrics that you believe are often used and probably overrated in your opinion when it comes to product management? We have a lot of lots of metrics, so there must be some useless ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's again easy to say these metrics are really stupid, that everybody thinks are important, but they're totally not. And these metrics are amazing. Are you not measuring them yet? Oh, wow, you're so behind the curve. Right? Like this is of course a very appealing clickbaity message that you can put out there. Hard to answer, because it's not like every business should be ignoring this and every business should be doing this. And I've seen a lot of product teams struggle a lot with metrics, because everybody told me I should be data informed instead. Do not be data driven. So I learned all that. So I started measuring stuff, right? And I started looking at revenue and the revenue per customer and monthly active users and daily active users and all of these stats. And I was like, okay, and now what do I do with this, right? So as a product person, I didn't really know what to do. And sometimes things went up and then they went down, and I couldn't really correlate it to anything that we had done because there's all these external factors. And I also didn't really know what that meant for me as a product manager. is this distinction between business metrics like revenue, like retention, and product metrics on the other side, which are maybe like conversion rates or average order values, etc. Like things, these product metrics are the things that often push the business metrics, but are way closer to the product manager, are things that we can actually impact. So for example, if you are in PLG, one of these typical product metrics that you can impact to drive revenue is to increase the free to paid ratio. And within that, probably you would increase the ratio of people who make it from signing up to reaching their aha. These are things that are a lot more tangible for product managers, because you're like, okay, I understand this, right? There's this clear correlation between they didn't reach what I believe aha is, so therefore they probably didn't upgrade to paid, and I should figure out what it is and then build some walkthrough or do something to kind of drive them there. And if that wasn't right, then I need to go back and figure out, maybe this wasn't their aha, this isn't what they set out to achieve. How can I find that out better? How can I do a better job at this? So this is all much more actionable. And of course, this distinction between business metrics and product metrics and traction metrics, also not mine. I think it also comes from Teresa Torres, but it's really, really helpful. And I remember struggling with this as a product manager, looking at revenue and going, cool, but what do I do with this?
Yeah. How can I influence? Yeah.
And I think in terms of business metrics, I quite like Kyle Polar from OpenView. He publishes a lot of nice reports on new metrics that you can watch that are maybe a bit more clever or thought out than the basic ones. When I started like 10 years ago, we spent a lot of time thinking about lifetime values, customer lifetime values. But then when I was always in startups and scale-ups, we really struggled with lifetime values, because like when you're in the early
phase, so hard to calculate it, right? How do I know? I launched this product only for 2 years. So
I don't know.
How can I?
This is like one of these metrics that we relied on and really spent so much time trying to get decent numbers, which were always incorrect, right? Like it's just really hard to get it right, because it's just so much estimating and guesswork. And now in return, we have CAC payback ratio, which is better, right? You just understand how much did it cost me to acquire this customer and how long do they pay that back through their subscription or through whatever they're paying. And I think Kyle writes different types of metrics, different variations that might be even a little bit cleverer, right? And kind of capture these things better, especially for PLG. I always read these reports, and sometimes I'm like, I can work with this, and otherwise I'm like, this means nothing to me, because I have a different use case. I use metrics differently. I'm not in a VC, and I am also not a CEO. So it's important for me to understand, but maybe not to work with. So it depends on what you're trying to do. Okay. Yeah, context.
That makes sense. To the metric you can impact. You know, when it comes to if you're thinking about revenue, it's harder. If you're thinking of free to paid ratio, then you can think, as said, about building a better walkthrough, better onboarding, maybe just lowering down, and we come back to the choosing side of things. Maybe just lowering the number of signups. Your ratio will go up. If you still keep the right people in, prevent some people from coming into the app, and that will increase this ratio and this efficiency.
Yeah,
really makes sense. And I really love the CAC payback look. Really, definitely one of the most accurate and simple metrics you can measure very early days. Gives you perspective on how efficient and profitable you can be. Definitely a great one. And I love Kai Polar content as well. Awesome, thank you so much. Any underrated metric? We just talked about CAC payback, so maybe this is the one, and you would say, like, look at it, try to look at it, at least in terms of and considering always the context, because we understood that this is the main thing. But look at CAC payback, for example. It's a good way to measure your efficiency. Any other metrics you will recommend looking at and measuring against your own context, of course?
I mean, I think I'm echoing the whole entire world right now if I say that we should look at retention, because I think 2023, or actually always, lots of companies have been going for profitable growth for a long time.
Yeah,
it's not a new idea. It's all like, oh, economic downturn. Now all of a sudden we care about profitable growth. And before that, everybody only just cared about growth at all costs. Again, a little bit too simplistic, but fair enough. But yes, retention. I think a lot of companies actually struggle to understand what retention really is, right? Before you can measure retention, you might need to define and align on what it means for your company. And I see a lot of companies really struggle with this. So it deserves its extra special focus. And of course, if you have a different kind of product, right? You add a new product line or you're targeting a new market, maybe retention looks different for them. Maybe you're expecting, or you have different personas, you have different roles. Maybe they're supposed to behave differently within your product. So we always just like throw out the word retention so easily, but to actually define it correctly and also maybe keep updating that definition as we learn is a hell of a lot of effort.
Absolutely, and especially because retention has multiple components, right? You can retain a customer, you can expand other customer, you can cross sell, you can to expand, you can upsell to expand. What does it mean? How does it look? It can be very, very different from one company to another. Absolutely.
And I'm also talking mainly of product retention, right? Like usage retention. So right. Yeah, retention as in they didn't cancel their subscription. Got it.
Fine. Yeah.
Like, are they still active, or are they kind of
are engaged, using the product, using it as it intended to be?
Yeah.
For the level of subscriptions they bought.
Exactly, and this requires so much understanding of how your product is intended to be used, right? Like, this is actually really high level to achieve, to be able to nail that down. And so you need not a lot of customer understanding and experimentation and measuring and just deep understanding of your customer too, and of your product and of your differentiated position in the market to figure out how your product is supposed to be used. And you'll probably still be wrong.
One of the things is that we all want to kind of challenge the status quo, innovate, bring things to a better place. And sometimes we don't always know, how to do that without, causing chaos or just, being seen like just a controversial person. Can you share some tools, strategy, methods to challenge the status quo without, causing this chaos or being seen like that?
I mean, I think it's always important to challenge the status quo, but not for the sake of challenging the status quo because you want to be that person in the room, right? But because there's something you believe in. My mom told me when I was little to always pick my battles. I think I carry that with me. I'm currently raising a toddler, so I pick my battles quite a lot.
True.
So I also do that in work, right? So you have to pick your battles and invest in what is important.
Yeah.
And this is always hard to know what is important. You develop a sense for it. Or you might a bit of a sense for it. Do, of course, also with understanding the strategy, the goals of the company, but also you kind of sense like, this is an amazing opportunity that we should tap into. I know it based on some proof points, but I also just really feel it. We like to shit all over gut feelings right now. I really don't. Like, my gut feeling has gotten me quite far in life. I try to back it up with proof, but my gut feeling has helped me. Yeah. So sometimes you just know that this innovation, this opportunity that is important to explore. I would recommend to make sure that you loop in the right people who need to be involved in the decision on it and provide them with the right level of context. So back up your argumentation with the proof points you have. That doesn't mean you should now go down the rabbit hole and collect all the proof points in the world, because that's a waste of resources. You didn't align on the fact that you're going to be spending those resources, but still back it up a bit and provide the context. And if you're confident that you've done that properly, at some point you have to accept the decision of your peers, right? So it's also a little bit potentially of disagree and commit. If you can't let it go, you can keep hunting a bit in the background, but it is, right? You can be contrarian up to a point. I think at some point it needs to be possible to work with you. And if you've picked a good surrounding where you actually trust your coworkers to be as smart as you, but in a different way, potentially, then you should also accept their decisions.
Right. Yeah, I love that. You can be contrarian up to a point. There is a certain ratio for every people to be contradicted upon. So everyone has a level of tolerance, of acceptation toward, how controversial you can be. So if you can, go against them, argue, challenge up to 30%. If you go over that, people will think that you are just a pain, right? So.
But this is super important to understand, right? Because we're pack animals, we're like social animals. So there are certain rules that you need to comply with, no matter what you really believe, right? Because once you are categorized as that person who's always annoying and fighting everything, this bites you in the ass, right? This is going to come back to haunt you, and it's really hard to get out from under it.
You're losing at the end. You are the one losing.
Exactly. So I think we go back to pick your battles.
Trust your intuition. It's okay. Gut feeling. Just balance it. Try to balance it as much as possible. But it's okay to trust your gut sometimes. Loop in the right people. Collect some proofs. Not too much. Don't spend your life on it. And provide context to the people you will loop in. And ultimately accept the decision.
And I think the most important one, which is the hardest one, almost, or a really hard one, is try to find an environment, work at a place where you trust your colleagues to be really smart and make good decisions, right? Like the best advice I was given, or one of the best pieces of advice, was never be the smartest person in the room. Look for a different room. Surround yourself with smart people. And this is hard to do, but I think it's a quest that is absolutely worth it.
Love it. When do you kind of decide in this context to push boundaries a bit further? So let's say you've done everything you mentioned now, so this is important. I balance it with some proof. I got some numbers. I looked in the right people, and we are at this stage of this decision, and the first reaction is to say we don't have time, we cannot prioritize that, or we don't have the resources to do it now. How would you assess, I'm going to push a bit further here, or I'm just going to drop it for now and come back in maybe 3 to 6 months and.
That depends, right? Depends on, is it even time critical? So there's no one answer to it, but if you believe it is time critical, right, then you cannot pause it for 3 to 6 months, then it just would not be viable anymore. And if it isn't, you can do that, right? So that's a decision. I think generally any idea, ideally you find the minimum viable way to test it, which is very hard because it has to be both minimum and viable, and striking both is really, really difficult. And that maybe there is a different way, right? So you have an hypothesis that something is going to be true. So maybe write down that hypothesis, go really buy the book, and then said, okay, this is my hypothesis. What do I need to achieve for this to be true? And when is it false? What are other ways potentially that I can test that hypothesis in maybe a more lightweight way, where I need fewer resources, where I need less, so that I can gather more proof points.
Less commits from the team.
Exactly. So I still need buy-in, right? Because I'm blowing my own resources, right? And I'm not going to be able to use them on something else. And I'm diluting my focus. So I still need buy-in for that. But maybe it's less buy-in because it's something that I can do on the side. I will work on it because I believe in it and I can't let it rest anyhow, but I'll need fewer resources to kind of build my case. So maybe that's an option.
I see the time is flying, and I still wanted to open a bit the topic on the future of product-led growth and the future of how things are organized. Where do you see PLG heading in the next 5 years? Are there any emerging trends that you're particularly excited about in product management, PLG, or customer experience in general, actually?
So again, I'm thinking of two things. The first one being that I see and I feel in the world of consumers and of even B2B product users that the expectations have gotten really high, right? Like I'm used to tools looking amazing, having this friendly feel, being really easy to use. I get to value very quickly. If you don't meet the bar, you are out, right? So the bar is really high in certain industries, right? Not everywhere, but in those where PLG motions are quite common, I'm expecting a lot. And for me as a consumer, this has been amazing because truth be told, kind of shamefully, there were a few things that I always felt that I was quite bad at, that I wish that I was better at. Like, for example, working with a lot of data in Excel, making a nice pivot table or a nice graph, pulling that out. I also work in multiple languages, so I always have to switch the commands depending on which computer I'm on. And I'm like,
I know that. Yeah, I know this one too.
Decent looking graph, and then it looks terrible in the end, and you have to then put it into a PowerPoint. And I also don't like working with PowerPoint. I found it really hard to make a decent looking presentation. So this was like so much suffering in my life. And now I use Airtable and I use Rows, and it's like, boom, like it's idiot proof. I would refer to myself as an idiot in this context. It became so easy for me to work with data and to make like nice looking reports. And then instead of PowerPoint, I started working with Pitch. And just with Pitch, it's easy for me to make a PowerPoint or like a presentation that doesn't look like absolute shit. So for me as a consumer, this has been a trend that's been amazing, to kind of take tasks that I was bad at and that everybody told me they're complex and you just need to go to school to learn them, that somebody said, no, you don't. Actually, you don't. Another one, for example, in product analytics, I was always a little bit ashamed of my SQL skills. It was a lot of Googling and trying to kind of like struggling a little bit. But I always care about working with data, right? So this was a bit of a hole, very basic. And now, for example, a tool like June that does product analytics, they built this natural language interface that you can just talk to in English, and it will like basically like a data analyst, and it will run a query in the background. So these kind of things are like, yes, massive things.
Thank you.
Yes, really. It doesn't mean that nobody should learn SQL. I probably should get a lot better at it, but it's just so nice that there are other options now. So we have these high expectations that there are companies that are really looking for, okay, how can we take a complex task that has really been bothering people and kind of break it down and make it simple and usable, friendly. Very happy.
Very happy.
Yeah, and another one that I'm
Favors.
expecting to happen is that, because now we have PLG motions really strong in like a couple of industries, like all design tools and all spreadsheet tools, and like basically everything that people like us are using. A lot of that, but it's not so common yet in other industries, right? I'm now seeing a lot of content popping up about PLG for enterprise, which will of course be different, but it's also coming, or is also there. But also PLG in target audiences that are not expecting it. Like I work with a couple of companies who are working with industry, or logistics, or warehouses, or scaffolding companies, like these kind of different target audiences that aren't us, where the audience is super happy with such a motion. They're not used to it. It is still a disruptive factor that is welcomed. So I'm expecting to see it spread beyond what we're used to, slowly but surely. In some way or form, right? Probably not the same one, but in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be hybrid. It might be a mix of different motions, as we were discussing earlier. I know that you mentioned a few books. So, if you could give me the list, I would share it with the audience as well. I think everyone would be happy to have them in their library if they're not there already. Thank you so much, Els, for your time, for all the thoughts, insight, perspective you brought here on all these questions. Was really very interesting. I hope we will do that again on another topic. Great to talk to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I had fun.